Next up is Hilary Draftz, an area director for the West for Focus. Welcome, Hilary. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, before we get going, everyone viewing, you can submit questions on the chat on the video that you're watching there, and we will get those submitted to me, and if we have time, we'll present those to Hilary. Now, Hilary, again, we're talking about St. Catherine of Siena and prayer, but at the end of the day, what do you think is the most important thing we need to keep in mind right now during these times?
Awesome. Steve, that's a great question. I think we're all kind of asking ourselves that, right? What is the purpose of this time, and why are we being asked by the Lord to go through this right now? And one of the things that I continue to come back to is that God never wills something except for our good. That he's a loving and a provident father. And so as he is willing this time of COVID, as uncertain and confusing and challenging as it might be for us, there's something even better that he wants for us than we would have had without it. And I think that greatest good might be our holiness. I think it's our growth in character and in Christian maturity that he desires us to get out of this. And one reflection that I kind of had on this was the last trip that I took before all the travel started shutting down at the beginning of March was a business trip with my husband to Hawaii. And we visited Pearl Harbor on a Sunday morning. And I was reflecting on the generation that went through the experience at Pearl Harbor. My grandfather was 20 years old when that happened. And I was thinking about my own life as a young adult. I was 17 when the planes hit the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center on September 11th. And the way that my grandfather's generation changed because of the challenges and the suffering and the solidarity of Pearl Harbor was I think beautiful, and it shaped the character of a generation. And in some ways, my generation didn't have the same experience coming out of 9/11. We had some challenges, and we kind of banded together, but we didn't have a draft. You know, our country didn't have to band together in the same way in order to overcome the challenges after 9/11. And I wondered, as we were coming into the time of COVID, after that visit to Pearl Harbor, my first visit there, I wondered if this is the moment for our generation. If young people today are going to emerge stronger men and women of Christ-like character and holiness because of this time of COVID. But it's not going to happen on accident, right? We have to choose that, and we have to go after holiness. And that can look like making choices to watch something Formed instead of on formed.org, Formation for Your Christian Faith, instead of on Netflix. It can look like picking up the phone and calling somebody who's in need. It can look like loving your friend, your family that you're with every day in your home, as opposed to filling your time just with entertainment and kind of mind-numbing things. And so I think that this time is such an opportunity for us to dive deeper into prayer and deeper into the interior life. When I think about holiness in a particular way, I'm struck by St. Catherine of Siena, and it's a beautiful thing we get to gather here on her feast day today. A couple of years ago, I had the chance to read Sigrid Undset's biography of St. Catherine of Siena, which I recently saw is available as an audiobook on formed.org. For those of you who have a subscription, I totally recommend this book. But the first half of the book really irritated me. If you've ever had those encounters with the stories of the saints where you go, that person is just so intense, I can't possibly relate to him or her. And St. Catherine's life of penance was so deep and so hardcore that I thought, what could this possibly teach me about the Christian life? And then the second half of the book, she goes out on active apostolate, and she is changing people around her. I mean, I desire the salvation of every person in the world. And St. Catherine, that happened around her like crazy. In fact, the Pope mandated that 3 priests go around with St. Catherine at all times in her company to handle the conversions, the baptisms, the confessions that needed to happen just by people encountering the person of St. Catherine, that they would be instantly converted by just seeing her and how Christ-like she was in the way she emanated the love of God. And I thought, yeah, that's what I want. None of this penance stuff. And I had a big realization that the fruitfulness that she experienced in mission was entirely rooted in her interior life. The holiness that the Lord had her walk through in her younger life, through penance, through suffering, but through deep prayer and through interior union with him. It was then the Lord working through her. It was the Holy Spirit, Jesus operating through St. Catherine that made her so fruitful. And so I really think holiness is the key to mission always. And this is a unique time for us to dive deep with the Lord into our own holiness.
You know, I loved that. I don't know if it's an analogy, but the way you compared it to past historical events to what we're facing now. And there's this obvious call, this obvious invitation to kind of engage. And there were two invitations you kind of mentioned on. One, allowing Christ to transform us. That invitation's there. Are we going to respond? Mm-hmm. And that too, that not only responding to allowing Christ to transform our hearts, but then responding to mission. But what does that look like right now? How does that idea of mission look like during this time?
Great question, Steve. Yeah, I think that mission, it's obviously something the Lord is inviting us into. If we're going to be conformed to his image, that's what holiness means, then we're going to give ourselves away to others, go outside of ourselves. That's what the Lord did. That was his whole life on earth in the incarnation and the crucifixion. And so I think for us, that means intentionality. Just like holiness, it's not going to happen on accident. It's going to happen by us desiring it and working towards it, primarily by the Lord's grace, always by the Lord's grace. But we do have to be intentional. We have to choose love over our comfort. And in this time, I think particularly there's a temptation to inertia, right? Because we're not going out and our schedule isn't kind of carrying us through the day in the way that it might have before COVID. This calmer time in our lives gives us the opportunity to have more space to reach out to others, but maybe the temptation not to do that. And so I really think intentionality is a key component that we have to work towards the salvation and the growth in faithfulness of the people in our lives that we care about. And one story it kind of reminds me of, because I think it's important for us to remember that it doesn't have to be inorganic. Intentional doesn't mean inauthentic. And I had a friend shortly after I left campus as a focused missionary and started working at our support center office. I reconnected with a friend from my younger years named Mike. My husband and I moved back into my parents' house for a year, and he lived nearby. So we grabbed a beer with Mike, and he said, guys, I haven't been to Mass in a while, and I'd really like to go. Could you invite me to Mass with you? And I'm like, yeah, that's like what I do. I'm a missionary. I would love to invite you to Mass with me. And so we started calling him most every weekend, and he would come with us sometimes and he wouldn't come all the time, but we continued to invite him, right? And there's always that temptation to think, I'm being pushy. He obviously doesn't want to come to Mass. I shouldn't keep inviting. I would be pestering him. And it wasn't just inviting him to Mass. There was also a time that I called and made an intentional invitation for him to come with me to the sacrament of confession, which is always a hard ask, right? Because it implies in the modern world, like, you might have something to confess. Like, yeah, we all do, but it's still not easy to say, and invited him to Theology on Tap events. And every invitation, sometimes a yes, sometimes a no, but to continue to be intentional. Eventually, he had a much deeper conversion in his Catholic faith. And I was so grateful to see that. It was like labor of love. And he would say it was really the persistence in the invitations to Mass. And so I just want to encourage us to reach out beyond where it's comfortable, beyond where it feels socially smooth, right? It's worth braving a little bit of awkwardness in order to intentionally bring the light of Christ to people that we love. This is a great way to show love to them.
It circles back to kind of what Kayla ended with, that she wants to take that boldness with her, that boldness to step out. And it's so important to stick our neck out at times and to be uncomfortable, again, for the sake of someone else and for the sake of the gospel continuing to be spread throughout the world. But what about, Hilary, for anyone watching who maybe is not on mission, who doesn't know what that means, who's not leading a Bible study, maybe just getting their feet wet in prayer, how can we maybe take some of those baby steps to practically get engaged into mission? What does it really look like?
Awesome. Well, I just think that the mission, the model of focus is beautiful because it's so simple. And I think that makes it really accessible for people. I mean, if you've looked at the growth of Focus, when I was a freshman in college, I went to a Focus conference that had about 400 people at it. And it was our national conference, equivalent to what Seek is today, right? It was the whole movement of Focus coming together. That was in 2003. And I remember last summer speaking to a gathering of only 2/3 of our missionary staff being trained. So staff members who've given full-time their commitment to this. And it was about 400 people. And I thought, wow, in 16, 17 years that we've grown to this size, where our conference of 400 could turn into a conference of 17,000 people that we had at Seek 2019. How does that happen? Because what we do is not rocket science. Anybody can do it. And that's what I think is so beautiful, that you need to be a disciple of Jesus Christ first and foremost, but he has given us his Holy Spirit. And so that's the expertise we need. So I just want to encourage anybody who is a student or a parishioner, a benefactor of Focus, anyone who desires to share Christ with others. You've encountered him and he's changed your life and you desire to bring that to other people, just to be confident that you can do it. And the model of Focus is really simple. There's a ton of resources I can point you to on our website for deeper formation and understanding of this, but it's essentially win, build, and send. So any of us can win our friends over to trusting us, into a relationship with us, which hopefully leads them into a relationship with Christ, because we want to introduce people that we love to our best friend, Jesus, and to help them to have trust in Jesus and in his church. That's win. It involves being human and being normal and not weird, right? It involves sharing our joy about the faith as we discover it. It involves being there for them in love when they need a friend. And some of that is right now. I think we're in a uniquely poised time for win, because a lot of people are lonely, especially people who live alone or maybe aren't close with the people that they're quarantined with in their homes, right? There is an opportunity to win, to meet people in their hurt right now. And so if we pick up the phone and call a friend, we might be that hope and that light in their day. That's a beautiful opportunity to win. There's also people who are unemployed, financially facing uncertainties, who are just not sure like what the next step is, who are maybe hurting because of disappointed hopes from the plans that they had for this year. We just have such a beautiful opportunity to win and to be present to them, to show them how the Lord loves them, and to win them over to the truths of the faith. The build stage is also beautiful because we can do it alongside people. Really, discipleship means walking side by side in company with the master. And we're all disciples of Jesus. And so I also want to encourage us that you do not have to be an expert in the faith. You do not have to know the catechism cover to cover in order to help teach the faith to your friends. You can share with them beautiful things that you're learning. You can watch videos or read books together with them so you're learning alongside your friends. That's a beautiful opportunity as well. So build is where we help people in their practice of the faith, in their knowledge of the faith. And send means that we invite them to go out and do the same with others. And when we win and build and send, and the people we've been walking with go out and invest deeply in a few others, that can grow exponentially. That's how Focus has had the impact that it's had today. Because what we do is intended to be repeatable, because it's the Holy Spirit working through us, through the authority of his church. That's the model that we're seeking to follow from the Gospels.
I love it. I love how practical you just made that we don't have to be professional theologians, philosophers to bring people to Jesus. It's like we don't have to know how to make a meal in order to bring our friend to our favorite restaurant to eat our favorite dish. We don't have to know what goes in it and how to make it, but we just want to bring them to what we love. I love how you made that so practical. Hilary, we have a couple questions here. First, from Mary. She says, what advice do you have for college students who are home due to COVID and their family members are not practicing Catholics? How can we grow in charity towards our family members?
Beautiful. Wow. A story comes to my mind. So I think there's a lot of things to say in terms of the how, but first I want to start with the story. A lot of my family members are not practicing Catholics or not Catholic at all. My immediate family also. And after I became a Focus missionary, I remember being home for Christmas. I was probably a second or third year missionary. And it was a year where Christmas fell on a Sunday. And we're a big Broncos family, so it was really more like Broncos football day than it was like the birthday of Jesus. And I just had a total chip on my shoulder about this, like, I want to go to mass and I want to go pray in adoration, and all you guys want to do is watch football, and I'm so persecuted, right? I had this like very whiny mentality about it, and it's true that football dominated our house that day, and I would have rather, the Lord dominated the day, but in the light of kind of feeling very sorry for myself, instead of feeling very hopeful and motivated to be on mission to my family, I had the wrong attitude. And I realized it the next day when I went to daily mass, and it's the feast of St. Stephen. And actually, this is funny because it has a tie-in to St. Catherine of Siena, who we're celebrating today, that I recalled during the homily that I had heard that the God the Father revealed to St. Catherine of Siena that the grace for St. Paul's conversion was won by St. Stephen's prayer for St. Paul during his stoning. So St. Stephen is being martyred by Saul, and he is offering that suffering in a Christ-like manner in forgiveness of Saul and for the grace for Saul to be converted. And then Saul has this amazing encounter with Jesus. He's totally converted. He becomes like the greatest missionary of all time. And I just remember thinking, that's not an accident. It's not like some unrelated suffering that Stephen endured then won this grace for an unrelated person, Saul. No, it was because he was suffering at Saul's hands that his offering of that was so fruitful for Saul's conversion. And it just clicked like in my brain, this is how I need to respond to my family. When I feel persecuted or ridiculed because I care so much about the faith and because I've built my whole life around that, I need to respond to my family in charity and to offer that interior suffering specifically for their good when it is at their hands that I feel mocked, and that's what's going to unlock the graces for them. And so I think our patience in enduring that, and our cheerfulness and our joy, our refusal to go down that road of self-pity that's so tempting and so obvious to us at all times, that's going to be the greatest witness to them and unlock the greatest spiritual riches for our family who we love so much.
I think that's great advice for people like me who always want to do something tangible, and we don't think that prayer and sacrifice is tangible. No, we want to get in your face. We want to invite you to something or tell you to read a book, and yet so often it's just our interior life, our prayer and our sacrifice for them that can have as much, if not more, of an impact. But it's got to be a balance of both, right? Both prayer and action. We have another question here, Hilary. It says, what do we do when we've got the battle of kind of laziness during this time? We want to take this time and actually discipline ourselves. We want to learn from the Easter Fervorino. Dr. J. Reyes gave us some great practices, but it's so tempting to just sleep in if we don't have to work, or we can just binge watch TV. So how do we actually fight kind of that temptation of laziness?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question. I think for me, in my own experience, the morning time really is the most valuable. That if I get out of bed promptly and I do one or two concrete things that I can feel like I've given my day to the Lord, starting in prayer, and then maybe starting with exercise, right? We're all human beings, and there is something real to the energy that activity brings us, and also that feeling of accomplishment, right? So I find in just a super practical human sense that if I start the day with a couple of small victories, I am much more motivated and much more likely to be in a great mental and spiritual place to invite the Lord into my day. So for me, that looks like, but I'm also human, right? So we have to motivate ourselves in ways that work. So for me, I do love coffee, probably more than I should. So having a pot of coffee that's ready on a timer first thing in the morning helps me get out of bed. I hit my knees very first thing and I make a morning offering the second I roll out of bed. Try to do it within a minute of the alarm. That's called the heroic minute, right? It's a challenge, but a little victory like the heroic minute really sets you up for success later when it's time to pray. So for me, 10, 15 minutes later, I'm on the couch with my cup of coffee. I'm doing my morning mental prayer, Lectio Divina, and to pray with real attentiveness. Also, then I just walk away feeling so refreshed. And then everything else I need to do throughout the day, if I start with a morning offering, morning mental prayer, and then a workout, I'm like gold for the rest of the day. So I know that's not true for everyone. I'm kind of a morning person, so easy for me to say. But I do think having those first couple of victories, small victories of discipline, scripted out so you can just follow the script, to me, that's been really a key for success.
I love it. I love the practical examples there, Hilary. I stink at a lot of those, but I work on them. I understand the importance. So thank you for sharing those with us. Okay, we have one more for you, Hilary, tonight, and then we'll let you go. Hilary, we have a lot of mission partners, maybe watching, benefactors watching, or missionaries who want to communicate with their mission partners. What are some good resources out there that we can point them to that'll help them grow deeper in their faith and do outreach in their parish as well?
That is a great question, because I really think there's such an opportunity for anyone who maybe isn't participating in the Focus mission on a college campus, but looks at it with admiration and with kind of, I've heard a lot of my mission partners will say to me, I wish I had Focus on campus when I was in school. And to which I say, well, you can do Focus right now. You didn't have to have missed out on it, So one of the things I want to point everyone to is focusoncampus.org/resources. This is our page for Bible study materials, discipleship materials. And one tool in particular I think could be really valuable during this time for the intentionality piece of what I was mentioning is something we call the depth chart. So this is a place where you can just list prayerfully the names of people in your life. And you can begin by just doing intercessory prayer for them, asking the Lord to bless them spiritually. And then it's shocking the way he will stir your heart to be his instrument in doing just that. So you're praying for somebody to come to conversion, and suddenly you feel called to reach out to them and maybe make a particular invitation or bring up a particular topic for deeper discussion. So even though you're praying for them, not necessarily for what you can do for them, but the Lord still is going to unlock your heart to maybe be part of his missionary response to that person. And so I think that depth chart tool is a fantastic way to bring intentionality into what we're about. And there's some training resources. There's an article on intercessory prayer, as well as a video training on how to use that tool. And that's something any one of us can do. We can be kind of identifying, is somebody really in a stage where they need to be won to a basic trust in Jesus and his church, or where they're already won over and they just need to be built up as a disciple and really learn how to follow Christ, encounter him in the scriptures in a deep and personal way, build up their sacramental life and their prayer life. These opportunities, the depth chart helps us to kind of sort of make a guess at where someone is at and really pray with what the Lord wants to do for them, possibly through us getting engaged in their lives in mission.
And what was that website again, Hilary?
focusoncampus.org/resources.
Awesome. We'll have a team member throw that into the chat as well. Hilary, thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you for all of your incredible insights, and thank you for the work that you do for Focus.
Thanks, Steve. Have a good night, everyone.